Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we are going to be finally talking about striking scorpions. Yes, it's been a while since I've talked about them. I know I've talked about them in a few videos here and there, but I haven't actually had a new codex video focusing on the unit. Now, I have used this unit extensively. I know exactly how they're best used, and I've had a lot of fun with them too. They are a very fun unit to play on the battlefield. Unfortunately, they're not getting a lot of play now in competitive play, and I think that is just due to the fact that they sit in kind of an awkward spot in the current meta, being that they have really bad matchups into the top factions. Having said that, I really think that is the only thing that is stopping them from being a competitive staple. And I think that as the, you know, months wear down and we get closer and closer to the balanced data slate and we see some nerfs, much deserved, from the top factions in the game, striking scorpions will start to see more play again. So, without further ado, let us go ahead and dive right in and start talking about one of my favorite aspect warriors, the striking scorpions. So in today's video, we're going to be discussing their stats, weapons, and special rules, just doing a quick review of that. We're going to be looking at their strengths and weaknesses, combos and synergies, and lastly, how to use and position striking scorpions effectively on the battlefield, which we will go to Tabletop Simulator for. So looking at the base stat line of the striking scorpions, pretty average for Eldar, except they do have a 3+ save, but they are blessed with a higher movement of 7, still toughness 3 elves. Exarch does have 2 wounds, but normally they just have 1, and leadership 6, OC 1. They also have a 5+ invulnerable save, characteristic of every aspect warrior. As far as their ranged weapons, they basically only have a couple of different ones. They do have a shuriken pistol base. If you decide to give the Exarch chain sabers, you can get, instead of a normal shuriken pistol, a twin-linked shuriken pistol, which is almost just as bad. But, you know, at least you get to reroll the wound roll. Right? Honestly, chain sabers are not good. Don't take them unless you're playing kill teams. As for their melee weapons, now I will say this before I go on. The Exarch does have the option of taking the Scorpion's Claw, which does come with a shuriken catapult, but it is a very short-ranged shuriken catapult. It is just a 2-shot, 12-inch shuriken catapult instead of the normal 18-inch shuriken catapult. So there is that as well, but you're often just not going to be using that. Okay, the Biting Blade is the best melee weapon for the striking scorpions. It helps them with the role that they want to play, and it helps them into units that they're good at fighting. So basically, it's good at what they're already good at, which is kind of what you want to give your aspect warrior Exarchs anyway. It does have sustained hits 1, strikes at 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, strength 6, which does help them wound Marines better, and AP -3. So that's pretty big. That means Marines are only saving on a 6, and anything with a 4-up save is not getting an armor save at all. It does only have damage 1, though, unlike its index counterpart. The chain sabers are basically just a little bit of a buff over the normal Scorpion chain sword. So instead of 4 attacks, getting 5 attacks at the same strength, AP, and damage, but it has twin linked. So it's a little bit better against guardsmen, a little bit better against cultists and things like that, but really, in my honest opinion, not much better at the vast majority of units that you're going to be fighting against. And as I said before, they come with Scorpion Chainswords base, which are essentially just, you know, Astartes chainswords. So Space Marine chainswords, strength 4, AP -1, damage 1. However, they do have sustained hits 1, and they have 4 attacks. So they do put out a lot of attacks. Now, if you don't want to take the Biting Blade, you can take the Scorpion's Claw. I know there's some Scorpion's Claw lovers out there because it looks awesome. It is really cool, but I will say this. Having only 3 attacks without sustained hits, when the whole unit's shtick is sustained hits, is kind of weak sauce. And I think GW kind of missed the mark not giving the sustained hits. I would have thought that having this at maybe 2 attacks, but with sustained hits, would have been a lot cooler. But, you know, unfortunately, they didn't do that. They didn't want Eldar to have fun, so there you go. Now, I will say this. The Scorpion's Claw does have damage too. So it is a slightly better weapon into Marine profiles that don't have a good armor save. So, Scouts. 4+ Space Marines, basically. They're a little bit better. You know, it'll kind of average out a little better against low armored enemies. However, I have to say, in general, you're going to want the Biting Blade for those sustained hits. As far as their abilities go, I think this is actually what makes Scorpions so good. The Infiltrators and Scouts combo allows them to basically pick a target wherever they want on the battlefield and maneuver themselves in such a way that they get the best advantage against that unit, whether you go first or second. So that's really where the strength of the Scorpions lies, becoming able to strike where and when you want to. They also have stealth. So stealth does help them marginally survive against things that shoot at them. So I've had a squad of Scorpions, because of stealth and because of a 3+ save, survive 20 shots coming from Space Marine intercessors, right? 20 bolter shots, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s is usually going to spell death for an Aspect Warrior squad, but with stealth, surprisingly, it doesn't. So the math on this works kind of like this. You got 20 shots, half of them are going to hit. We're assuming you're not going to oath the Scorpions because there's probably a better oath target out there, unless you have double oath, in which case, middle finger to you. No, I'm just kidding. You're just a Gilliman lover at that point, but, that's okay. He needs love too. You're usually not going to oath them, so about 10 bolter shots are going to hit, and, about 7 are going to wound, 7-ish. So you get a 3+ save, about 2 Scorpions die, right? Versus 20 shots, 14 hits, 7 wounds, you're probably going to lose about, I would say, probably 3 or maybe even 4 Scorpions at that point, depending on how, well your opponent rolls. But, typically you're losing the majority of your unit. Whereas if you only lose 2 wounds out of the squad, you can put 1 wound on the Exarch and you can put, you can erase a Scorpion, and you still have a pretty functioning unit that can do damage into another target. So I do think in some cases stealth is really a powerful ability for these guys, and your opponent cannot underestimate them, right? Your opponent has to deal with them in an adequate way, or else they're going to just run ramshod throughout your opponent's army. And of course, they have battle focus, so they can benefit from all those abilities. As far as their datasheet ability, they do get the Mandiblasters, which allows them to score critical hits on 5+ if they made a charge move. This is great. However, keep in mind, it doesn't really help you against really tough targets. It just helps you kill the targets that are already within range of their strikes. So again, things with toughness 4, 2 wounds, 3 up save is about the limit of what they can handle. And this special rule helps them deal with those types of units. They do also come with an Aspect Shrine token, of course, so if you want to change the Exarch's Biting Blade, one of their misses, into a 6 to hit, proc that critical sustained hit, get another hit out of it, that is a really powerful way to use it. Typically, it's the only way to use it because, you're almost never going to want to reroll a wound roll unless you get like 5 5+s, which weirdly enough, I have seen the Exarch do that. I've done it myself. I've rolled, 4 dice and they're all 5+s on charge. And I'm like, hell yeah, let's change one of those, wound rolls into a 6 instead. But, usually you're going to change a hit roll to get that sustained hit. As far as their wargear options, of course, the Exarch can take a Biting Blade and Shuriken Pistol, or Chain Sabers instead of the normal Scorpion Chainsword and Scorpion's Claw. But that's about it. Other than that, the squad has no other options. As far as the unit composition, they're all equipped with Scorpion Chainswords and Shuriken Pistols, of course. The Exarch is armed with a Claw base, but of course can swap it out. And they can be taken in squads of 5 or 10. Now, this is a little bit incorrect. This is from an older, kind of PDF printout I had on my computer. They are 85 points now, so they're not 75 points anymore. They have increased by 10 points, so hopefully you're listening to this and not just watching it. But yes, they are 85 points now for 5. They still are 150 for 10. So you do get a deal buying them in a 10-man unit, but they don't trade as effectively, and they are way harder to hide. So you better have a good plan with them if you're going to use a squad of 10. All right, and as for the keywords, lastly, they do have infantry, although weirdly don't have grenades. And historically, this unit has had grenades in the past, in the old days of Warhammer. So I kind of found it surprising that they didn't get them in the Codex. But yeah, they don't have grenades, so unfortunately, they cannot use the grenade stratagem. Okay, let's talk about their strengths and weaknesses. So, their main strength, and what makes them really good in my mind, is the fact that they have Scout and Infiltrate. This makes them a powerful early board control unit, and they can basically pick and choose what they want to take out. And this pairs really well with some of the secondaries that are in the game. So things like Overwhelming Force, Secure No Man's Land, this can help them score those turn one very easily. And while they're doing that, they can also kill stuff. Unlike some of the other units in our army, like Rangers, right? Rangers are their competition, much cheaper, but they can't kill things like Space Marines. So, you know, you got to pick your poison. You want to pay less points and not do any damage, or you want to pay more points, do damage, but also not be as expendable, right? But they are very good at that. They are also durable for Eldar with the stealth and the 3+5+ invul. You know, Rangers only have a 5+ invul basically against most enemy fire. So they're going to just be rolling 5+s. Scorpions are going to roll 3+s against most anti-infantry fire, you know, bolters and the like, the AP -1 weapons. And they have stealth, which makes a multitude of shots a lot less effective. They also have solid damage against most infantry targets under a Terminator. So anything toughness 4, you know, decent armor 3+, nothing too fancy. Like they're really bad against 2-up armor saves, but they're pretty good against 3-up because, you know, 50-50 to take a wound is pretty good. And then they're really, really good against 4+ armor save units like scouts. However, they do have their weaknesses, right? They're expensive for a small early game trading unit. And usually that's what they are, unless you can be clever in your deployment. We'll talk about some clever deployment tricks in the tabletop simulator example, but you really do have to kind of fake out your opponent with these guys to get the most out of them, because they are a little bit expensive. And they can't deal with things over toughness 4 reliably, right? Anything toughness 5, once they start wounding on 5s, that's when sustained hits really drops off hard. So they can't really deal with those types of units, and they really struggle into vehicles and monsters, obviously, right? They're not meant to deal with it. Eldar as a faction is an army of specialists. These guys just don't do well into those types of units, and that's okay. It's okay not to do well against those units, but it does explain why they're not really seen in competitive lists nowadays all that much. You might see some here and there, but they don't typically perform well in certain matchups, and it's very obvious when you see games, you know, either tournaments that are, you know, live streaming on YouTube. I know War Games Live does some great, you know, streams and stuff like that. Tabletop Live as well. Tactical Tortoise does some good live streams. You know, if you see Striking Scorpions in bad matchups like that, they typically perform really badly. So against Chaos Knights, Imperial Knights, Death Guard, honestly, I've even seen them perform horribly against Emperor's Children. You know, it's just they can't deal with anything toughness 5 or above. Okay, having said that, are there any combos and synergies that really unlock these guys to the next level? Well, not really. You know, I think one detachment in particular, the Aspect Host, is really good because they can reroll hit rolls of 1, and they can also ignore hit modifiers, strength modifiers, damage, or AP modifiers with the Warriors Focus stratagem. Having said that, who cares? Because usually they're able to do what they do anyway in other detachments as well, right? Other detachments kind of use other units a little bit better. Like, for example, Seer Council is very, very much a more defensive detachment. So Rangers work perfectly in Seer Council, or Corsairs, they work just fine because they're cheaper and you want to be able to spend more points on other units like Warlocks. In Warhost, I think Rangers and Corsairs, again, work in tandem a little bit better than Striking Scorpions do in this current meta. Aspect Host does give them some bonuses, and I do like them in Aspect Host more than other detachments, but in general, I think it's just a bad meta for them. So there's not a lot of combos and synergies that help them overcome that. Guide and Doom can kind of help their damage a little bit, but again, unless they're going up against something they really shouldn't be, and they're probably not going to do damage to that unit anyway, Guide and Doom are kind of wasted on them. They can also be joined by an Autarch. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This would all be solved by an autark. Put an autark in the unit, you can infiltrate up the autark. You know, the autark is going to be, you know, have an enhancement, maybe the aspect of murder, or maybe something else, give them a free command reroll, whatever it is, right? Whatever detachment you're in with a good enhancement for an autark, that's going to change the Scorpion's dynamic. But unfortunately, it really doesn't, because what ends up happening is they end up becoming a really expensive trading unit, right? The types of units that they're going to be effective against doesn't really change all that much, even with an autark, because you are now paying double the amount of points for them. So it's kind of like having 10 striking scorpions. It's like, yes, you might be able to do a lot more damage into that 5-man Death Guard unit with an autark, but you're still not killing that many more of them for the points. And you're definitely not going to kill the whole squad with an autark attached. So, you know, if you charge in, let's say you don't have line of sight, so you can't throw a grenade. You charge in with an autark is hitting on 3s against Death Guard usually. You get 3 hits. You're wounding on 4s. You use an aspect token to guarantee one of those hits, so you get 2 wounds, excuse me. You get 2 wounds on average, typically. And the Death Guard are probably going to miss both their saves, so that's 2 models dead. The rest of the unit probably kills maybe 2 more. You're still not killing the whole unit, and they are now out trading you, because now they have a single model. They can do objectives, they can, you know, sabotage, they can do all these things with that single model, but you're not really able to do anything with your squad because they're gonna die, because you're Eldar, right? So adding an autark to the unit doesn't help them with their role. However, I do think there's some cool combos with that. I do think you can make it work if you're going against somebody that's maybe a little bit less aware of what the autark can do or what the squad can do in general, or if your opponent makes a small error in deployment in the beginning of the game, in deployment or something. But typically in a highly competitive environment, an autark in a squad of striking scorpions, it just doesn't really work out. I know a lot of you are going to say otherwise in the comments, but I've used it. I've used it many times against people who are competitive within my community where I live, and it's fun. And it does kill stuff. I did manage to kill a lieutenant with the aspect of murder, which was really fun with an autark in the beginning. But having said that, it was also a less expensive squad at the time. It was only 150 points back then. Now it is, you know, almost 200 points for an autark and 5 striking scorpions. So yeah, it's just not cost effective. Okay. So, having said that, I've kind of outlined what the Scorpions do, what they're good at, but how do you actually use them on the battlefield? So, what we're going to do next is we're going to hop into Tabletop Simulator. I'm going to give you some quick examples of how to deploy them effectively, but remember that basically all of the deployments of your Striking Scorpions are going to be based on where your opponent deploys. Striking Scorpions are a unit that really want to take out a target and be able to put pressure on that side of the battlefield. If they're not doing that, if you're just using them to simply move block every single game you play them in, they're not doing their jobs, right? There's cheaper units that can do the same exact thing as striking scorpions if you just use them to screen and move block and try to prevent your opponent from getting into the middle of the battlefield. At 75 points, what they used to cost, you could definitely argue that striking scorpions were just fine doing that in some games, right? I even had several lists with 1 squad of Rangers, 1 squad of Scorpions, and sometimes I did just use them to move block. Having said that, there's cheaper options for that. Rangers, Corsairs can do the same exact thing. So these guys, you really do want to do damage with them, and that is hard to do sometimes if you don't know exactly how to place them and what traps to look out for. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into Tabletop Simulator now and show you how to use them on the battlefield. All right, everybody, welcome to our Tabletop Simulator example where we will be discussing striking scorpions. So as I previously stated in the video earlier, striking scorpions are an aggressive unit. They do want to be killing other stuff. It is pretty much a waste to use them for screening and move blocking purposes because there are cheaper alternatives available that are not only cheaper, but they're also better at it, right? Rangers are much better at screening and move blocking than striking scorpions are, and also Corsairs are much better than striking scorpions at the same exact role. So what we want to really try to achieve with striking scorpions is being able to deny our opponents that first turn primary, right? We want to put them in a state where they have to kind of flounder on what units they're going to use to get a primary objective point. And that's striking scorpions. So striking scorpions, a little bit expensive. They're 85 points, of course, as we discussed earlier, so they're a little bit pricey, but they are very good at tackling other units that are around 80 points. Things like intercessors, assault intercessors, jump pack intercessors. Sometimes, if you're lucky, even infiltrators. But we're going to go through a few of the ways in which to use striking scorpions, but also some of the things to look out for, because there's a lot of first turn traps that an experienced opponent will play against you to neutralize the threat of the scorpions. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Now, the first thing you'll notice is over here on the left side, this is a typical deployment for a striking scorpion unit. Now, because striking scorpions have scout 7, they can move after we know who's going to go first. So putting them there is okay because, as we can see, if we want to move them back into behind this wall, for example, we can do that with a 7-inch move, right? So basically, we're just using the striking scorpions here to block off any chance for our opponent to deploy any infiltrators of their own. And if we can pull this off successfully, if we get the first deployment, we can essentially make sure that whatever our opponent places on this objective within reason, right, in the first couple turns of the game, our scorpions will be able to threaten that point. Now, they won't always be able to win against certain units, and your opponent, seeing your striking scorpions here, may very well have a counter in place for you. And we'll go over the way to kind of get around that in just a second. But the good news here is that if your opponent has a unit that is, equivalent in points, something like intercessors, assault intercessors, basically any kind of toughness 4 marine profile or less, scorpions are going to wipe the floor with them. So in this example here, we have a unit of basic assault intercessors deployed as a counter to the scorpions. Your opponent's thinking, well, if I charge these scorpions, I'll kill them, I'll get on the objective, no problem, right? So you roll to see who goes first. Now, if you go first, if they don't have anything over here, if they don't have any screens, and if they don't have something that can heroically intervene to save these guys, then this is an easy kill, right? Scout forward a little bit, just outside of 9 inches, of course, of the enemy unit. Then you move up and you charge them. You shoot them with a couple pistols, you charge in, you wipe the unit, and then maybe you can hide behind this thing, hopefully. Maybe, maybe not. Really, striking scorpions, their use really depends on how your opponent deploys. So when using striking scorpions, looking at where your opponent deploys their units is vastly important. Now, let me give you another scenario. Let's say we don't get the roll for who deploys first, and your opponent, instead of putting, assault intercessors here, they put a small unit of scouts right here. All right, just a little unit of scouts. They're 65 points. They're really cheap. Scouts, in my opinion, are criminally undercosted. I know some people argue, but I think they're really good for 65 points. And scorpions are a little bit expensive for their points. So this isn't going to be a good deal, right? Because first of all, to be outside of 9 inches, we're going to have to be right here. Right? So we're not really going to be able to take advantage of our scout move because our infiltration move stops here. And if we do want to get first turn, or if we do in fact get first turn, we charge these guys, we kill them, and we trade down, because whatever they're going to have behind, assault intercessors or whatever it might be, are going to be able to kill our scorpions in return pretty easily. So what do? Well, there's a little trick that we can do in this case. So let's say our opponent deploys scouts here, right? We've already lost control of this side as far as our infiltrators go, so we just put something over here, right? We're going to put something away from the scouts. So instead of placing something between these two objectives, let's wait on the scorpions. And let's place rangers instead. Let's place 5 rangers over here. Disregard the Death Guard Marines standing right there. They're there for, another example later down the road. But let's just go ahead and spread our guys out, make them 2 inches apart here. All right, the Rangers are going to be over here, and they're just going to basically be just off of the objectives here. But, you know, like I've said in previous videos with Rangers, they're going to be able to move on to the objectives if need be later on. So we're going to have them right there. Let's just make sure we're outside of 9 inches real quick. Whoops, we're a little close. We're about an inch too far up. No big deal. It's going to move them back an inch point something. There we go. And we're just going to move this Ranger like right here. Boom. All right, so we have these guys spread out. That means our opponent can't infiltrate over here if they want to. They just can't do it because they'll be within 9 inches. If they want to go over here, that's fine. It's not that big of a deal. So we have our Rangers here instead. Now, what that's going to cause our opponent to do is our opponent's probably going to think to themselves, well, this is probably a pretty secure area. I'm going to go ahead and start deploying near my home objective where all my cover is. So they're going to start deploying their units, and you have the advantage of being able to deploy your Scorpions last. So you'll be able to see where your, opponent's other units are and react accordingly. For example, if your opponent does end up putting, a group of intercessors here or a tank here or something like that, let's say your opponent wants to put, I'm just going to clone this real quick. Let's just say it's, I don't know, a regular predator, not a ball predator. Right? They have their regular predator back here just for anti-tank duties. Totally fine. Now, Scorpions can't deal with this, right? So we're going to need to bring something else to be able to combat that. We may need to bring some fire dragons and a wave serpent over here so they can, go forward, kill this tank, and then open up a spot for our Scorpions to kill this infantry with. We might have to bring swooping hawks or warp spiders over here to deal with these before our Scorpions can get a good target. Again, Scorpions are often thought of this kind of first turn screening unit that you have to use the move block. But the truth is that if you're using Scorpions at this point, instead of Rangers or Corsairs for your move blocking needs, you're paying too much. It was more of a decent argument when there were 75 points, where they were kind of in that middle ground of expendable, but like also, kind of weirdly durable assault unit early game. Now, they are a early game assault unit. You do want to use them in the early game, but you cannot afford to throw them away to move blocking and screening unless you're facing an opponent that has really expensive models, right? Like, unless you're going up against Imperial Knights, an army that doesn't have any good targets, that's the only way that you want to use Striking Scorpions as a move blocker, if you have a choice. There's a reason why not a lot of, Eldar lists nowadays feature Striking Scorpions, because the meta is very skewed towards super tough infantry, and we'll talk about that in a second. Or if not super tough infantry that they can't really deal with, big vehicles like knights. Or monsters like Chaos Demons. So, again, they deploy their tank here. We can deploy some stuff to counter it, and then we can set up our Scorpions. We can set up our Scorpions right behind this wall. Now, this gives us a couple advantages. One, if they want to try to mess with us, right, if they get first turn, we can always scout the Scorpions back, right? There's nothing stopping us from putting them back here and making our opponent go through the wall and then charge over if they want to get to the Scorpions. Again, very bad idea on your opponent. They're kind of just wasting their unit if they do that. And just to give you a quick example, if we look at Scout's melee profile, they actually have a really bad melee profile compared to regular Marines. They only have 2 attacks in close combat. They do hit on 3s, but they're at AP 0, so Striking Scorpions are getting a 3+ save against them. Again, Scouts are very good for their cost. They're very durable for their cost, but they only have 2 attacks apiece, which does limit their abilities, even with an Oath of Moment, right? 2 attacks apiece against a 3-up armor save. You're not going to kill them all. The Striking Scorpions probably get the better of you, and then you're dead, basically. You're not going to kill all the Scorpions. You're not going to score an objective, because as we see, I'm not on an objective. I'm not giving you overwhelming force. I'm not giving you extend enemy battle lines or anything like that for free. So we're good there. The only thing you can possibly get is Purge, right? And you're really not going to be able to score that either, because you don't have the firepower or necessary close combat to kill all 5 scorpions. You just don't have it. So these scouts are just out of luck, right? Even with an advance in charge, if they're not shooting before they go in there, they're not going to do much. Even if they're armed with close combat weapons, they're just not really going to do much. In my experience, also, scouts are typically just armed with shotguns. If they are armed with close combat weapons, it's just because your opponent doesn't really care about their shooting, because really the only shooting weapon worth anything is the missile launcher, right? One of the scouts has a missile launcher. But again, if you advance with it, you can't shoot. It's not like the shotgun where you could advance shoot, right? Because that has assault. So, yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is if they get first turn, you can move your scorpions back and you'll be totally safe, because scouts really can't threaten you from this range, right? By the way, this is 6 inches right here, and they need to be fully within the terrain feature to get you. So they need to roll at least probably a 2 or 3 to get within the terrain with enough models to shoot you and then charge you. And by the way, if they do shoot you, we have aspect tokens for that, right? We can fade back and then kill them anyway. So these scouts are heavily outclassed by scorpions if they get first turn. If we get first turn, the problem is we're kind of in the same situation, because we'll kill these guys, but they have stuff to back it up. So if this is all they have on this side of the battlefield, their expansion objective, by the way, then we have to try to take that expansion, and scorpions can help you do that, because scorpions kind of embody a more aggressive play style in the beginning of the game. So what we do is if we have a squad of fire dragons up here, right, we can move up their wave serpent right up the line. Pretty far too. We can dump our fire dragons out. We don't need all of them to be able to kill this guy. We kill this dude. And then we can follow up with the scorpions here. And we can take this objective. Now, we don't have to go directly into the scouts, right? We can always do something like this. We can go up this way and then hope to make a charge. But I'm going to tell you that's risky, right? Making an 8 or 9 inch charge with a +2 movement token. So let's just quickly, I'll just show you guys. These guys moving at 9 inches, it's still not far enough to get you within a good threat range. And we don't have many units in our army that advance in charge. We only really have banshees. So whatever, it doesn't matter. They're right there. I don't even think they're in range. Well, barely. They need an 11. That's just not going to happen. Right, guys? We're not going to roll an 11. That's really hard. So there is a better way of preventing this from happening in the very beginning of the game. If you actually get to deploy first, right, and the scorpions are not there, let's say that you need to block something else on the battlefield with your unit, or you may not know what's here yet, right, because it's the first deployment, so you don't know these two things are here. You could drop a squad of rangers over on this side of the battlefield. So doubling up is sometimes okay. Case in point, if we put rangers right here instead of over there, right, that's our first drop, we get the first deployment, we put them over here, we can essentially negate our opponent's ability to deploy their scouts there. So our opponent doesn't have the scouts on the side of the battlefield. They'll probably be over here behind this piece of terrain, or they'll be over here or over here somewhere, right? I'm just gonna put them over here for now, but they could be anywhere else, right? Your opponent still needs to take this objective. So your opponent might load up on that side with units that can kill rangers, because rangers are only 55 points. Intercessors are pretty good. They have good shooting. You might have a unit of intercessors kind of strung out here. They can pop out right over here after being, sticking the objective, and then they can shoot them to death. So we can take advantage of them putting units here to kill rangers, and maybe they have something to get on that objective, but we're going to make sure they can't. So we're going to put the scorpions at the end of the deployment phase. After they deploy everything, we're going to put our scorpions right here. We're going to put them kind of in the same spot, right? Where we can always scout back if we don't get first turn. But if we do get first turn, we're going to be able to charge and tie up whatever's over here, right? So we can scout up a little bit. We can move up, ignore Overwatch, charge in, consolidate, tie them up in combat, and then we can put something on this objective over here, right? So I'm just going to put my Scorpions over here. They've killed these guys, and they're kind of tying up this ball predator or regular predator in combat. Again, you don't typically want to mess with a ball predator, but if you can stop it from flaming the other units in your army, why not? And of course, there's going to be some traps that a good opponent will pull if you do, if they do get the chance, if they are Blood Angels. If they're regular Space Marines, it's not a problem. But if they're Blood Angels, they can do a couple things to get around this. Basically, we have this objective now. We can put anything we want on it. We can move up a squad of Corsairs. We can move this squad of Rangers up into here, right? Something I love doing sometimes is, instead of just trying to fight your opponent over here and block them, sometimes I just like going like this, right, with Rangers. If your opponent leaves their expansion this open, of course, with the help of your units, you could do something like this and just say, yeah, come and get me. All of their stuff is behind these 3 pieces of terrain. By the way, this is terrain layout, I want to say terrain layout 5. I think it's 5. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but it's sweeping engagement. So your opponent's going to be mostly deployed around their home objective here. And realistically, if they do deploy stuff over here, it's going to be vulnerable. Now, we have several units in our army that can take advantage of units deployed over here. Again, I mentioned Fire Dragons earlier and a Wave Serpent. They can deploy right here. First turn, they can go up, destroy. Also, Swooping Hawks or Warp Spiders. We can have Swooping Hawks or Warp Spiders move right up in here, or right from here to here, take the objective, destroy whatever's over here. And we can take this side of the battlefield because it's very weakly defended by terrain. And again, Scorpions are going to be that unit that helps you do that. They're not a move blocker, typically. They're not a screening unit, typically. Although they could be, but they're a little too expensive for that. They're going to be an early game, aggressive style unit that you want to use to eliminate enemy units from the game. That's it, right? Point blank, you want to be able to eliminate enemy scoring units typically. Units that are around their same point level so they don't trade down, so that you have more resources than your opponent. But at the same time, just eliminating their units so they can't score secondaries as easily is what you want to use Scorpions for. Now, there's a couple of traps you have to watch out for Scorpions as well, and this is why Scorpions are not so popular right now. So let me show you a few examples. The top armies in the meta right now are Chaos Knights, Imperial Knights, Death Guard. All 3 of those armies are basically immune to striking Scorpions in one way or another. They will take some damage, but they won't take enough, and they'll actually trade up against striking Scorpions. So let's talk about the first and probably the heaviest counter to striking Scorpions. Plague Marines. Plague Marines are a 90-point unit that have a lot of special weapons. They have really good combat. They have lethal hits with Plague Knives. It is AP 0, but they do have the ability to either give themselves -1 to hit or -1 armor on their army roll in the beginning of the game. So either one of those things is already bad against Scorpions, right? That's already bad news for the Scorps. On top of that, they're going to be reducing your toughness. So instead of wounding on 4s, or excuse me, wounding on 3s, they're going to be wounding on 2s with lethal hits. So that means pretty much all of their wounds are going to go through, and they're hitting on 3s. So if they have 3 attacks apiece, that means 10 hits, and almost all of them are going to wound, right? Not all of them, but almost all of them. Maybe they miss 2. And maybe you lose 3 Scorpions out of the bunch. That's really terrible, right? If they have the -1 AP, you're losing more. But check this out. Let's say your Scorpions want to charge a unit like this. So we charge in. First of all, they're probably going to heroically intervene with something if you do this. But let's go ahead and assume they don't. You charge in your striking Scorpions. Everything's good. You get into combat. And you get into combat with this 90-point unit of Plague Marines. And they're sitting there, and they're, let's say they choose the -1 to hit, just because I personally like that one the best against Eldar, because it really skews the damage that Eldar can do. So this is what's going to happen. Let's do a quick roll. Your Scorpions are going to get 12 attacks for the normal Scorpions. Right? Because they have, 16 attacks, sorry. They have 4 attacks apiece. So you're going to roll your dice. You're going to be hitting on 3s, or 4s, excuse me, because of their -1 to hit aura. Again, look at how much more missed because of that -1 to hit aura. So we get rid of all those. However, we do crit on 5s, so we do get 3 more. Didn't really equal out, but we did get a few more hits. Now we need 5s to wound, because these are toughness 6. This is one of the other issues that Striking Scorpions have. They have no way of dealing with anything really above toughness 4. But we rolled it anyway, and because we're beast, we get 4 of them, which is, again, not average at all, but we got it. So they're going to get 3 up saves against this. And they only miss 1. I think that's pretty average, personally. I think that's probably what should have happened anyway. So, or no, 2. Excuse me, they're going to get 2. So we're going to drop a Marine, which is kind of lucky, but we're going to do it. So we're going to drop a Marine. Boom, we've killed 1 Space Marine. Now keep in mind, these units are almost the same cost, and we only killed 1 model so far. Let's see what the Exarch does. We're going to save the best for last. Exarch gets 4 attacks. Again, he's hitting on 4s. Doesn't get a lot of hits, unfortunately, but he does get a crit. And we are going to move this one into a crit as well, so that we can get double sustained hits, right? So we're going to get 2 sustained hits there. This is going to be a 6 because of the aspect token. We're going to need 4s now. I know, strength 6 needing 4s to wound. Think about that. And we get 2. So they're going to take 2 6-ups here. And they do make 1 of them. So one of them is going to suffer an additional wound. So maybe this Plague Marine with Blight Launcher suffers another wound, right? Not enough. It's not enough. Right? We only killed 1. We really effectively only killed 1 Space Marine. 1 Plague Marine. Now you guys can, and this is without accounting for Heroic Intervention. This is without accounting for any stratagems they might have. That, you know, if they have like a, you know, buff to their durability at all, like a -1 to wound, that would really hurt us, right? So we're not accounting for that stuff, and they're still winning by a significant amount. So let's see what they kill back. They're going to have 1 normal guy died, so they're only going to have, well, the Plague Champion has a Power Fist, so we'll do him separate. 1, 2, and this one is going to go ahead and have that heavy Plague weapon. So we're just going to be attacking with 2 normal guys with Plague Knives here. They're going to be hitting on 3s, wounding on 2s, with lethals. So there's going to be 6 attacks here. And again, we're not accounting for stratagems or anything like that, so let's go ahead and just roll. All right. And 1 lethal hit so far, and 2s to wound. That's going to be 4 more. So they're going to need 5. It's crazy. They're going to need 5 saves here, the Scorpions. So we rolled well. So we only lost 1 Scorpion so far, but we still haven't really attacked with the bigger weapons yet. So we've lost 1 Striking Scorpion. We have the Power Fist. I believe he has 3 attacks, but let me just double check. Plague Champion, 3 attacks. Again, hitting on 3s with lethals. Everything has lethals in this army, by the way, so it's crazy. Wounding on 2s. So that's going to be 2 more. These are at -2, so 5 ups on these. Okay. Hey, look at that. Honestly, though, even though we got really lucky there, it doesn't really matter because we got the heavy plague weapon as well. Yeah, that's going to be 3 more. 3 more attacks. Hitting on 4s, though, luckily. Doesn't really help us. Another lethal hit. Wounding on 2s again. All right, so 2 more 5-ups. Can we do it again? Okay, well, hey, I'll take it. Here's the crazy part about this whole thing, though, right? We still didn't win. Even with really good rolls, we still got crushed. And they're also going to get the opportunity to just walk away, right? They don't have to take a battle shock. They didn't suffer enough damage. So they can literally just walk away from the combat. They can go do whatever they want, get behind here, go on to the objective, whatever, and these guys are dead. Or they could just stay in combat and kill us the next turn, right? So we might get another chance to attack, but we don't have any more aspect tokens. So basically, this is a bust, right? We've charged our striking scorpion unit into a plague marine unit. We didn't do any damage, and they are going to slowly kill us over the course of the next two combats. So they're gone. And that's if they don't choose to heroically intervene, which, by the way, they almost certainly will have had something to heroically intervene with. So yeah, scorpions don't do well against plague marines. They just don't do well against them at all. So that's one of the challenges in the meta. The other challenge I want to talk to you guys about is the Blood Angels. Man, honestly, I think scorpions against Blood Angels, it's really tough, because unless your Blood Angel opponent is just not paying attention or is not making the right moves, you just can't really do anything to their army turn one. So reason why I say that is because the Blood Angels have the old 1-2 punch. They have the old Ball Predator Overwatch. So if you want a little bit of extra range to tag your infiltrator unit, right, then they could just Overwatch you and kill you. If you go, I'm immune to Overwatch with the Battle Focus token, they can just turn around and say, Heroic Intervention with the Sanguinor, and I kill you, right? Sanguinor, by the way, doesn't mess around. He has 8 attacks, Dev Wounds, AP -3. You're just not surviving the Sanguinor, right? He's just going to slaughter you. Same thing with Mephiston, right? Both of them are incredibly good in combat. I mean, Mephiston's a little bit less good than the Sanguinor against striking scorpions, but having said that, he's probably still going to kill most of them, if not all of them, on average rolls. So if you charge this infiltrator unit, you will get heroically intervened into, and then that's basically it. Your squad's dead. Because both Mephiston and the Sanguinor have fights first, which kind of grinds my gears a little bit, to be honest, that they have so many fights first. But then again, we have characters like that too, so who am I to complain? Anyway, so it's hard to attack the Blood Angels, right? And again, I know it's a Ball Predator, but I really meant Space Marines, regular Predator over here, right? So that we don't have to worry about Overwatch or anything like that. They will usually always have a character with Heroic Intervention or a squad with Heroic Intervention next to things they don't want you to tie up. By the way, there's a reason why they just put Sanguinor, or they put, a unit of Marines right next to their vehicles. It's not always because they don't have room to deploy everything. It's often because a unit like this, charging in and blocking up a bunch of enemy units, can be really bad for your opponent, right? So your opponent will often have units behind here that can heroically intervene and kill your striking scorpions. So there's a lot of ways in which scorpions can get shut down early, which is why I think deployment is so important. Scorpions struggle on 2 types of boards. They struggle on short boards, the long ones, Hammer and Anvil. Not Dawn of War, what's the other one? I think it's Tipping Point. Yeah, it's Tipping Point and Hammer and Anvil. They really struggle because they don't have enough room to maneuver, and everything in the opponent's army is kind of packed closer together. So when that happens, oftentimes the scorpions struggle to actually survive because Heroic Intervention is only 1 CP. Your opponent only needs 1 CP to be able to do it turn 1, and then what happens is your scorpions just get picked up. Now, your scorpions may be able to kill something first, but then they're going to almost always get picked up in the return strike, right? So let me give you, and by the way, if they have fights first units, you're not even going to be able to attack, right? So if I charge into these infiltrators, Mephiston comes here, kills them, done deal. They're dead, right? So these are a couple of the traps that you need to watch out for as an Eldar player. And basically how you get around these is you save your scorpions for later, right? Instead of putting your scorpions out there turn 1, you have a scout move. So if you deployed right here, let's say, right? And this is actually what I found to be a pretty good tactic. Your opponent is going to see a unit of scorpions on an objective behind a wall, and they're kind of going to go a little crazy if they're not a really, really good player. And they're going to think to themselves, wow, what an easy kill if I draw something like Overwhelming Force or Extend Enemy Battle Lines or, secure, secure no man's land or whatever objective they get that they have to kill an enemy unit, right? They're going to be like, oh, this is great. But because Scorpions have a scout move, if they get the first turn, even before secondaries, you don't want to risk them scoring points. You just go like this. See ya. You're not scoring anything, right? You're not scoring points on secure no man's land. Or, I mean, you may get secure no man's land, right? But you're not going to also kill my unit. You're not going to get overwhelming force. You're not going to get, purge the foe. I can't remember what the secondary is called for the life of me. Let me just go ahead and look at this just real quick, just to see. Just to see, because it's it's now grinding on me. Right? Not Cold the Horde, where is it? I think it's called Purge, but I may be wrong. No prisoners, that's what it's called. No prisoners. Anyway, okay, yeah, no prisoners, right? We're not going to just give you free points to score. That's the big thing. So Scorpions are all about reading the tides of battle, making sure that your opponent is not going to be able to just kill them turn one for nothing. That's the big thing right there, right? So basically, overall, when you're using Scorpions, you want to use them for a couple things, right? You want to use them for an aggressive pushing unit. To be able to succeed using them as that, you're going to have to read your opponent's deployment. You're going to have to sometimes even counter deploy with things like Rangers. We talked about that earlier, right? Moving a squad of Rangers to screen for the eventual Scorpion drop. Or you're going to have to do things like wait until your opponent actually activates some units. Use your units like Rangers or Corsairs. You should have a couple units of Rangers anyway, or a unit of Rangers and a couple Corsairs. If you really like Scorpions and you want to use them effectively, then use these units first. Use Rangers and Corsairs first to kind of test your opponent a little bit, and then go in with the striking Scorpions. Now, they still suffer, unfortunately, from things like fights first. And the problem is that unlike Howling Banshees, they can't really be used defensively because units of Howling Banshees, by the way, they're really good at defending because they have fights first, right? So they can heroically intervene just like the Sanguinor or just like Mephiston or just like, Marneus Calgar and his bodyguard, right? They can get that fights first. Or I think Gilliman maybe has fights first. Anyway, one of the characters has fights first. So you can really use that to your advantage. And knowing that your opponent has that as well, stay away from it with your Scorpions, right? Your Banshees can do the same thing, but if you recognize your opponent has something like that, then stay away from it and just wait for the right opportunity to strike. It's also not a bad thing if you're running something like a Falcon and Dark Reapers. It's not a bad thing to have some striking Scorpions, hang out in the Falcon for a little bit back here, right? If you know that your opponent has something that your Scorpions can take out, like a light infantry unit that's a little bit hard for your Banshees to take out, something like Gene Stealers from NIDS are a good example because Scorpions are great at killing those guys. Or, things like Imperial Guardsmen, right? Things with a lot of wounds that are not necessarily tough individually. Then using a Falcon for that is pretty good. Maybe you don't need the wound rerolls on your Dark Reapers. You can use your striking Scorpions for that instead. So knowing how to kind of position your guys in such a way that you can get a huge advantage later on, maybe turn 2, turn 3, when your striking Scorpions have a little bit more room to, go after stuff, is better than losing them right off the bat. So yeah. So anyway, hope that was helpful, just going through Scorpions. Scorpions, unfortunately, not that popular right now because of the fact that they are a very meta unfortunate unit right now, just because the meta is so toughness skewed. They have trouble into high toughness targets. That's okay. That doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that in those matchups that are just everywhere right now, that they're going to struggle a little bit. And that's okay. Knowing how to use them anyway, if you really want to use them, is key. And there are units in those armies, in Imperial Knights. Some people in Imperial Knights, they also pick up not cultists, I'm not talking about Chaos Knights, but they do Imperial agent allies. So they'll have like a Colidus assassin, or I can't remember the name. I think it's Colidus. They'll have a Colidus assassin, or they'll have a unit of breachers or something like that, right, to score points on objectives, and they'll just have a bunch of big knights. Well, honestly, quite frankly, scorpions are good at killing those units so that the opponent's big knights have to go out of their way to score those secondaries instead. So that could be a real big help in some games if you have a unit that can do that. The last thing I want to mention really quick is, what if I have an opportunity to score secondary points with my Scorpions, even if it's a unit that I'm going to trade down against? Let me give you a quick example just to end the video. Basically, let's say you have a unit of Assault Intercessors on an objective, right? They've just taken the objective, or not even Assault Intercessors. Let's say these are like scouts or something, right? And your Scorpions are way back here, and you draw Overwhelming Force. Well, absolutely use your Scorpions, right, to get Overwhelming Force, but make sure that you kill this unit. So if you have to do some pot shots with some shuriken cannons somewhere to like kill a couple of these models first, and then shoot and charge in with your Scorpions, then do that, right? But Scorpions don't guarantee to kill a squad of these guys. You do sometimes need a little bit of help. And that's why I do like running Scorpions in Aspect Host. I think Scorpions are good there, even though the meta doesn't really support them right now. So anyway, again, I'll stop blathering on, but that's Scorpions for you. And I hope you guys learned a little bit of something and this helped you out. Let me know how else I can improve these little examples and stuff like that. I really, want to get this down so that I can help you guys be able to play against different factions, stuff like that. And also, if you have, questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I would love to hear your answers or questions so that I can answer them. All right, guys, back to the video. All right, guys, we are back. And in conclusion, Scorpions are a very good unit. They're just not in a meta that suits their strengths. They're going up against some of the toughest factions in the game. We've had the most toughness queue we've ever had since the beginning of 10th. And honestly, I'd argue that we're going up against tougher odds than even Aeldari in the beginning of 10th, right? And I'm not talking about damage Aeldari, because we all know how much damage the Wraith Knights did and stuff like that, but tank Aeldari, where they had, a squad of Wraith Guard and a Wraith Knight and all that. I think we have a higher toughness skew now than we did back then in the beginning of 10th. And I'll argue it all day long, because I played Eldar back then and people played against me, and looking at what I had to deal with as an Eldar player, even using all those defensive bonuses and buffs and stuff like that to make my army pretty durable versus Knight armies nowadays, it's just, there's no comparison. So Scorpions do almost nothing into Knights and Death Guard with, obviously probably don't have to say that, but there it is. They really don't. Unless they're going into things like Poxwalkers, which Poxwalkers are very cheap and expendable, and they will trade down with Scorpions or trade up against Scorpions, right? So that's a huge issue in competitive play right now, is those tough factions for Scorpions. And again, most targets that they can destroy do cost less than the Scorpions themselves. So they have a very select amount of units that they actually trade up against. So you do have to pick your fights very carefully. And if you're going to use them for screening and move blocking, like I said before, we have Rangers and Corsairs for that. So they're not in a great place. However, having said that, if you are in a meta or a local area that doesn't have a lot of Knight players, that doesn't have a lot of Death Guard, you're just going into, Space Marines and armies like that, these guys are still awesome. Actually, one of the factions I really love them into is Necron's Silver Tide. If somebody's running a lot of Necron Warriors, I love these guys. These guys are so good into Necron Warriors, right? You shoot the Necron Warriors with something, you obliterate like half the unit, you follow up with the Scorpions, you kill the rest of them, it's glorious, right? And then they can't resurrect themselves. I do love Scorpions in that kind of matchup. With, obviously, you're going to need to, give them some backup. A squad of 5 can't take on a squad of 20, but they're really good, and they're really good at picking up small squads of Immortals too. Oh my god, guys. So good at killing Immortals. My god. But anyway, enough of that. I really do like them in that matchup, but they have a lot of good matchups out there. It's just everybody in competitive play right now, it seems at the moment, is just running Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights, and Death Guard because they're super OP. And I don't say like OP like they're impossible to beat for Eldar, because I do think Eldar have a really good matchup into those factions because we have specific tools that not a lot of other armies have into knights, and we can trade up against knights, whereas most factions don't trade up against knights, right? And we can trade up against Death Guard with certain units, even though most factions can't do that because, other factions, they have the durability, but they don't have the mobility, and they don't have the damage that we can bring with certain combos and stuff like that. So, we just happen to have a good matchup into those factions. Scorpions, unfortunately, don't play a role in that. But when those factions get nerfed, I think we might see a resurgence in Scorpions again because they are a solid data sheet. Okay, guys, that is it for today's video. Thanks for watching. I want to let you guys know also that the Eldar Knights Kickstarter project that I have been kind of forwarding and talking to you guys about and, railing on the Discord about now and again, we have been funded, so it is happening, and I'm already working on the playtesting, and the playtesting is going great. I'm having loads of fun with the army. I've not won every game. I will say this. It plays differently than Eldar, but it has the same trickiness and the same kind of Eldar feel, but they're knights. So knights are another beast when you're playing them on the battlefield. They do take a little bit of getting used to. Like, I'm used to scoring secondaries like sabotage super easily, and I'm realizing with knights, it's really hard to score that. So it's been a load of fun, though. The playtesting's been going great. The army's very balanced. It's not OP. I'm having a good time playing it. So that's going well. We do have an artist for the project. He is going to do the art for the codex. That's, going to happen. So really cool stuff for the future of that. I do have a video on it if you want to check that out, but we are still accepting late pledges if you want to get a printed version of the codex. So if you want to check out the Kickstarter, I'll leave the link in the description. And again, like, I'm not trying to pressure anybody into it. It's basically just for the most Eldar, Eldari fans out there that are just like the biggest Eldari fans of the old kind of Eldar. But anyway, check it out if you want to. Enough rambling about that. I also want to let you guys know, patrons and supporters, thank you for supporting the channel and really helping it grow and succeed. I really do appreciate that. I'm going to be trying to do some live streams with, either tabletop simulator games or kind of strategy talks and stuff like that later on this month. So later in August or September. I don't quite have the setup for it, but I'm going to try to get some new hardware and, kind of try to get it going so that my computer and stuff like that can support that kind of thing. So we're going to try to get that going. So again, thank you. If you do want to support the channel, by the way, there's a link in the description for the Patreon. All Patreon members get ad-free videos. So this video will be ad-free on the Patreon tonight. So, or today, whatever time zone you're in. After this video posts on YouTube, it's going to be free, ad-free on my Patreon for paid members. Lastly, I do have a different levels for my Patreon. So I have a Court of the Young King level that you can use to play games against me for coaching purposes and for, practice purposes. If you want to get better with Eldar, I am more than happy to spend a day with you, or half a day, couple 3-4 hours playing a game, talking about lists and stuff like that for a very reasonable cost. And just because, I obviously want to help the community play better and grow as a, because Eldar are very cool, and I think more people should play them. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, Eldar are such a hard faction to play sometimes that people get into it, super excited about the models and stuff, and then they realize how hard it is to play, and it kind of crushes their spirit. So let me know. I'm here to help. Lastly, I do have a channel store page and an Amazon affiliate link for Craft World Eldar inspired apparel. So, Craft Worlds, basically the old Eldar stuff, Iandin, Samhain, Bealtan, all those kind of symbols and stuff like that. Eldar inspired stuff, Corsairs. I have basically everything on the channel store page. Check that out if you want some Eldar inspired apparel, and an Amazon store link for discounted Eldar minis. Okay, anyway, I've gone on long about that. Have a good one, everybody, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.